Hi class, today we are starting chapter 7. This is section 7.1 on inverse variation. Don't worry, we're not doing graphs. I just ran out of regular lined paper. So we're going to use graph paper. Okay, we have two types of variation. There's one called inverse, which we'll start with, and then there is one called direct variation. So we'll start with inverse variation. And we talked last chapter about inverses, finding inverses, and how they are things that are going to undo each other, okay? And so it's kind of that same thing. It is the opposite thing. So as one value goes up, the other value goes down, okay? So there's different examples of that. When we see a problem, it's going to say something like this, like y varies inversely. Can't spell inverse, there's an E in there, E-L-Y. Spells inversely with X. Y varies inversely with X, okay? When you see that, you're going to write the equation y equals A divided by X, okay? A is a constant, okay? So that tells us how much it varies. So when one thing goes up, how much does the other thing go down? Or as one thing goes down, how much does the other thing goes up? So inverse variation, I'm just going to kind of put some pictures here. As one thing goes up, the other thing that we're talking about goes down, okay? And then the same way, if something else is going down, the other value is going up, okay? So maybe the more rain we get, the amount of rain we get goes up, the amount of people who are outside goes down, just something like that, okay? So that's inverse variation. We'll do some examples with it here in a second. The other one is direct. So direct variation, okay, is the opposite. So instead of as one thing goes up, the other one goes down, this one is one thing goes up, the other thing also goes up, okay? So you'll see it written like y varies directly with x, okay? And so this one is going to be multiplication. Y equals A times X is what that's going to look like. So again, as one thing goes up, the other thing goes up. Okay, I have small boys, and as they grow, their shoe size goes up. So as their height goes up, their shoe size goes up. Same thing, if something goes down, the other thing also goes down. Okay? So, you got the X and the Y, and then your A. I'm just going to go ahead and write this down. A is a constant. So it's just going to be a number that's in there. And that's going to be important for us to find here later. Okay, the first thing we're going to do, the first type of example, is figuring out if it is direct, inverse, or neither in their variation. Okay? So those are your options. Is this direct variation, inverse variation, or it could be neither. They could just be completely unrelated. Okay? So I'm going to give you a few things. Oh, example 1. Okay? So the first one, 1a, y equals 4x. Okay, well, we have 4 times x. It looks just like this. The a would be 4. So since I have multiplication, right? So direct is going to be multiplication. Inverse is going to be division. So since I'm multiplying here, this is direct variation. Okay? The next one I've got, x times y equals 5. Well, this doesn't look like either of these. It's not y over 5x, okay? And it's not y equals 5 over x, and it's not y equals 5x here. So what is it? Well, we are going to rearrange this a little bit so that we can figure out what it is. We always want to have y equals something to figure out our variation. So if I'm going to change this into y equals, I need to get rid of this x. So I'm going to divide both sides by x. And when I do that, I'm going to have y equals 5 over x. Now that looks like the inverse one, where I've got my constant of 5 over x. So this is inverse variation. Okay, so if it's not obvious what it is, if it's not a y equals, you need to change it into a y equals. Okay, I do want to point out though, if this was switched around and it was x over 5, okay, just because you see division does not mean that it is inverse. This one is actually direct variation because x over 5 is the same as 1/5 times x. You're actually multiplying by x instead of dividing by x. So it's the constant is the 1/5. So this one would be direct variation. Okay? So just because you see division does not mean it's inverse. It's got to be divided by the x. The x has to be in the denominator. Okay. Part C, this one, y equals x minus 4. Okay, well, I got y equals, so I don't have to rearrange this, but it's x minus 4. For direct, it has to be multiplied. For inverse, it has to be divided by x. Neither one of these things is happening, so this one is neither. Okay, there is no direct or inverse variation here. The last one of this type is, this one is y divided by 2 equals x. Okay, again, this one's not in the right form, so we need to rearrange it. So I need to get the y by itself, so I'm going to get rid of the 2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So that will cancel. So you're going to end up with y equals x times 2, which is the same as 2 times x. And now that I have rewritten it this way, I can see that this is direct variation because it's x times the constant. Okay? So on these, solve for y, and then see if you're multiplying or dividing by the x or neither. Okay? So that's the first type. The second kind of examples are what I like to think of as like translating. Okay? So we're going to translate this from words into our math that we like to use. So here's what this would say. Write an equation if z varies directly with the square of x and inversely with y. So it's not just going to be like those ones at the top where it's just like y varies inversely with x, okay? First of all, we got a z in here, we got squares, we got both direct and inverse all in the same thing. So we want to take all of this and we want to translate it into a math equation, okay? Well, first of all, know that whenever we see the word directly, right, we are going to have multiplication. Okay, you're going to multiply. I'm going to use that multiplication sign. And when you see the word inversely, there's going to be a division. And when you see, right here, when you just see the word varies, and this is where we're going to start with, we are going to write whatever they said equals A. Okay, so there's always this A, this constant. They don't give me any numbers. I don't know what it is. So we're going to use A. So how this is going to go, write an equation if Z varies. So I'm going to stop right there. So I'm going to say Z equals A. Okay, so whenever you see the word varies, whatever variable they put in front, write that down, equals A. And then if it says directly, you multiply times A. If it says inversely, you divide the A. Okay, so here it says Z varies directly. So I'm going to do multiply with what? Not just with X, but the square of X. So the square of X, it does not say square root, it says square. So that means X squared, X to the second power. Okay, so we got that first part. Y varies directly with the square of X. Next, and inversely. So inversely means now divide that A by, what does it say? Y. So inversely with Y means divide by Y. And then this is just the equation. There is nothing else to do because we just want to write an equation. We're not finding the A. We're not doing anything. There's nothing I can simplify. Okay? So again, Y varies, or Z varies, so Z equals A, directly with the square of X, so times X squared, and inversely with Y, divide by Y. That's it. Another example like this. Okay, we're still going to be writing our equations. So write an equation. If W varies inversely with Z and directly with P and Q. Okay, so write an equation if W varies inversely with Z and directly with P and Q. So there's lots of stuff going on. Don't get overwhelmed. Just break it down. Okay, so we're going to start with W varies. Right there, just stop and write W equals A. Okay, because half the time you forget the A, which is the most important thing here. So W varies. W equals A. Inversely, so inversely signals I need to divide by whatever comes next with Z. So I'm going to divide by Z. And directly, so that now means I'm going to take this times P and Q. Okay, so P and Q are going to go together times. Now, the one thing about this is I can simplify this a little bit. Okay, instead of leaving these two separate here, P and Q are like PQ over 1. So I'm just going to write this as one whole fraction. So it's going to be A, P, and Q on the top when I multiply those together over Z times 1 will just be Z on the bottom. And this is our final simplified answer. Okay? So again, W varies, W equals A, inversely with Z, so divide by Z, and directly with P and Q, so times P and Q on the top. Okay, now the next ones we're going to actually put in some numbers with this. Actually use find A and stuff. So this is example 4. Okay, so this says, suppose Y varies directly with X. Okay, so that's it. Suppose Y varies directly with X, so not a lot of this other stuff. And then it says, if y equals 45 when x equals 2.5, find y when x equals -3. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start with this. Suppose y varies directly with x. Okay, we are going to first write out our equation. So over here on the side, I'm going to give us some steps. The first step in this is write the equation. Okay, so step one, write the equation, and that's going to come from this right here. So this is step number one. Y varies directly with x. So y varies, we're going to write y equals a, and then directly it's going to be times x. Okay? So then we are going to use the x and the y that they tell me first to find the a. So step two, use x and y to find a. Okay, so that's this x and this y right here. So that's step number two. That was step one. Step two, we're going to put these in. So if y is 45 equals, a is going to stay there when x is 2.5. So a times 2.5. Okay, so I plug those in. Now I can solve this equation. I would divide both sides by 2.5. 45 divided by 2.5 is 18. So a equals 18. Okay, we need that to do this last step. Find y when x equals -3. So that's our third step. And we have to write a new equation using a. Okay, write a new equation using a. So this a of 18 is going to go into this original equation here, and that's going to be my new equation, not any of the numbers, just the a is the only number in here. So it's going to be y equals 18x. That's my new equation, step 3. Now I can use that to find y when x equals 3. So into this new equation, I am going to put in, -3 for the x. So you're going to do 18 times -3, and that is -54. So find y when x equals -3, y is -54. So I'm going to write that in a sentence. So when x equals -3, y equals -54. And the thing about finding this equation is now I could use it over and over. I could say find y when x is 2. Well, you just plug 2 in. Find y when x is -30. You just plug in -30. Once you find that a, that constant, any numbers of the rest of the numbers go quickly. Okay? So this is your final answer. Okay? So let's do another one. And I actually want you guys to try this one. So I want you to try example 5 here. Okay? So again, suppose y varies inversely with x. Okay? If y equals 10 when x equals 2, find y when x equals 7.5. Okay, so use the problem above it. I want you to pause the video and try this on your own and then restart it and watch the answer. Okay, you should have tried this. So we're going to start with writing down the equation that they give me in this first part. So y varies inversely with x. So y varies, I should write y equals a. Inversely with x, so that means I'm going to divide by x. So that's step number 1. Step 2 is plug in this y and x to find my a. So y equals 10. A goes on the top. X is 2. Okay, well this time I'm dividing by 2, so to solve for a, I need to multiply both sides by 2. So that is going to end up being 20 equals a. Now, that's not the answer, and I need to use that to write a new equation. So it's going to go back here, and so it's going to be y equals 20 divided by x. Now, this is the equation that I'm going to use to answer the question. So find y when x is 7.5. So y equals 20. And I'm going to plug in 7.5 for the x, so divided by 7.5. So 20 divided by 7.5 is 2.6, repeating, so we're going to round it to 2.67. Okay, so again, when x equals 7.5, y equals 2.67. So translate what they give you into words, put in the x and the y, solve for a, and then use that to write a new equation to solve that last part. Okay, this is the end of our lesson for tonight, so don't forget to write a summary and have a great night.